FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
A questioner raises issues of women's rights and democratization within Jordan and states Jordan has touted its liberalization of women's rights more than other Middle Eastern countries. Can you give us an update on this process and other moves toward further democratization within Jordan itself?
Yeah. No, we have made giant strides, I think, in this area. And I know this because for a while I chaired the consultative committee for the UN Development Fund for Women. And broadly speaking, again, to place it in some sort of context, alas, I drew the conclusion when I was chairman of that particular group that, broadly speaking, all of us, governments, with few exceptions, and there are exceptions, but there are very few, take women's issues seriously. And I had so many examples to use on so many occasions that I was spoiled for choice. But when I first took over, for instance, the Women's Development Fund, UNICEF, the fund for children, had a budget, core budget of almost $1 billion a year. UNFM, the equivalent for women, had a core budget of just around 20 million. I mean, it was so anemic and so impoverished, I almost proposed that we just disband it altogether, not waste our breath, because we were not serious as governments in terms of dealing with this issue. And it's across the globe, you know. And I often felt that, and this is my personal view, I don't speak on behalf of my government, but I felt that as the chairman of that committee, that there were plenty of governments who would pay lip service because at the time of elections they needed to have the votes of women, but there was no earnest desire to create the right environment for promoting gender equality and those sorts of issues. In Jordan, we have, I think, made great strides in dealing with this issue. Her Majesty Queen Rania has been very vocal on the issue of abuse of women, domestic abuse, and we've already started where children have been concerned in terms of opening hotlines. There was a concerted attempt a number of years ago which didn't succeed, but I think many Jordanians are passionate about this, and while I can't speak on behalf of the government on this, but I can speak perhaps as a Jordanian, there were many who were concerned about the continuation of honor crimes, which still exist, and it's a sort of misnomer to call them honor crimes because there's nothing honorable about them. In the eyes of many of us, it's straightforward murder or manslaughter of a variation, but clearly not something that requires any sort of mitigating circumstances where sentencing is involved. And I think there was if I'm correct in thinking this, that there was a study done recently in Jordan where most Jordanians, north, south, east, west, from the tribal areas and beyond, have begun to say, you know, enough of this. These are our sisters, they are our daughters, we can't continue. One of the positions I adopted while I was at the UN after the Beijing conference on women was that we also shouldn't be selective about these issues. And I'm now drifting away from your question completely, but since I'm talking and no one's going to stop me, I'll continue.
That's absolutely right.
You have under the rubric of violence against women a whole host of offenses, not just honor crimes, but there are all sorts of things: bride burning, acid throwing, female infanticide, and so forth. And if we were going to be intellectually honest, what we would do is not just focus on one issue where the country in trouble, or the country dealing with the issues, by and large a small country. We would set up a calendar and we would say for the first 10 years, 5 years, we're going to devote ourselves to resolving this. And we're going to put resources, make resources available for workshops, we're going to have conferences, we're going to look at legislation, how we can help, that sort of attitude. And then once we've settled this, we'll go to the next one. But it was always bewildering to me to see this great excitement in terms of many in the community who wanted to see us succeed on this issue, but were not willing to speak up on other offenses which would bring them into direct collision with much larger countries. And I always felt that this was sort of intellectually dishonest, and that we needed to have a calendar for dealing with these problems.